Well, welcome again to another of our PACTS webinars. And this time we've got a really interesting session for you, which I'm sure you're going to enjoy. It's called Helping Your Primary Age Child with Their Reading and Writing. And I've had a sneak preview of what's going to be said. And I think actually, I wish my teachers had these kinds of ideas because they look really amazing and very much like fun rather than like learning. It was super to watch those. And we have a really good panel with you tonight. And rather than my introducing them, I'm going to ask Amanda, who's head of the Learning Support Service in Stockport, to introduce the panel, and then we'll get going. You will see me probably disappear from this point, both by audio and video, but I will still be around. I'll be monitoring your questions in the Q&A or the chat and getting them ready to pose to the panel at the end of the presentation. So please don't wait for the presentation to end before you start the questioning. Just drop them in the chat and I'll pick them up at the end. Great. So Amanda, thank you very much for joining us. Please do introduce the panel.
Thank you very much, Paul, for that introduction, and hello everybody, and thank you for joining us this evening. As Paul has said, my name's Amanda Lane and I'm the head of the Learning Support Service, and we're a team of specialist teachers who work in Stockport schools to support children who have additional learning needs. And we do this by helping schools, helping class teachers, TAs, to understand different learning difficulties and how best to support them. And we also work with some young people directly as well. So colleagues that are on the call today are Jacqui Terry, Emma Earnshaw and Liz Hitchinson. They are highly experienced specialist teachers, and they're going to share with you some ideas and suggestions of how you can also support your child's learning journey in partnership with schools. And today's focus is very much going to be about literacy. So how you can support your child's literacy development in general at home, but also how you can support them with their homework tasks as well. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to the real specialists on the call, Jacqui, Emma and Liz. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. So tonight, as Amanda said, we're going to be looking at how to help with your child's English homework. We're going to start off on the next slide with just thinking about reading. And I think it's fair to say that maybe if you're here tonight, not only may you have some questions, but you'll also have some really good practice that you're already using with your child or children. So please do share that expertise and knowledge in the chat, any ideas that you have to add to those that we're sharing with you tonight. And as Paul said, please do ask as many questions as you like, and we will endeavour to answer them. If we can't tonight, we will endeavour to get the answer to you following this webinar. So if we move on, Liz, to the next slide, we're going to start looking at an issue that sometimes causes quite a lot of discussion with families and schools, which is they've brought a book home that they've already read, and they've read it loads already. Now, familiar reading is actually a really, really important part of your child's homework and reading diet. And we're going to explore a little bit about why that is, so that we really make the most of these familiar books that, that children bring home with them. So in a moment, we're going to show a video which I was kind of forced to do, bribed to do with my son when quite a few years ago now. You'll see my hair colour has changed slightly. Now my son is dyslexic, he is a fidget, he is a great example to sort of show how things can be quite challenging. But this is going to be a short video of him reading a familiar book to me as part of his 10-minute reading homework. As you watch it, I want you to think, what does he do? And what does he get from it? and what do I do as the adult. So I'm going to ask Liz to start sharing the video, and we're going to stop after about 3.5 minutes.
Just bear with me a minute while I share it in another way. It's not hyperlinked in. I love it when technology does this and you're on a call. Bear with me.
So while Liz is just doing that, I'll sort of just jump in with a few other things to say. We are going to talk about time and the amount of time we should be sort of spending on reading. And what we are going to be saying later is 10 minutes is absolutely fantastic. If you can commit to 10 minutes every day, that is absolutely wonderful. And the first 5 minutes can be reading that familiar book, because it's really, really fabulous to start off with something the child feels comfortable with and confident with. So although this might feel like a long time to be spending on that familiar book, it really is quite important. Okay, it looks like we're ready to go. We haven't got any sound, Liz.
Bear with me again.
He had like this awesome magic rucksack.
He did, didn't
where
he?
whenever he pulled the cord, something popped out.
Yeah. Well, read your title.
Jack and the Mountain. I want to climb that mountain, said Jack. I'll get my backpack. Pop! Out of his backpack came a helicopter. Jack flew to the mountain. Zip!
You have to whisper. Break it up. See if you can chunk it and see what's that word.
Into his backpack. What went the helicopter? Jack looked up at the mountain. Whoa, said Jack. The mountain is very big.
I like your story voice today. Is that Jack climbing up the mountain?
It looks like a boy with a shield.
He does. He's on an adventure.
But why would he be carrying a shield?
Well, that's his backpack, isn't it?
Yeah, but why has he got it like that?
Oh, I don't know. It's just the way it's been illustrated. Okay, let's...
He might have just turned around to look down.
Maybe.
Jack started to climb the mountain. He climbed and climbed and climbed. What do you think made the footprints?
Good boy. Did you go back and read that again
Yeah.
to help work it out? That was fantastic.
Then Jack saw some footprints, some very, very big footprints. Can you read that bit again?
Yes, if you want
There's
to.
a bit more expression. Then Jack saw some footprints, some very, very big footprints.
That was super expression, wasn't it? Makes me want to listen to you more.
Okay, we'll pause it there, Liz.
Suddenly, Jack...
So, what I asked you to do was to have a little think about what the child was doing and what they got from it, and what the adult was doing. So because you can't unmute, if you want to just put in the chat any observations of what you saw either the child or the adult doing, or benefits of what that experience gives to the child. Thank you very much, Heather. So absolutely, positive reinforcement, and that works both ways. So the adult can use that opportunity to really praise the positives for the child, and the child can experience success because it's a book they know, and they feel that they can succeed with it. Did anything else that people saw? Okay, I'll help you out a little bit. One of the things that we see in this kind of time where they're sharing a known book is that they are able to show off that expression. They can start to talk about things with that lovely story voice and read with that story voice, and that's what we really saw with Charlie when he was talking. So yeah, thanks. Someone's put in as well, I think it's Paul, that I waited for him to have a go. So this, as it says on the slide, is a real key part of the familiar reading, to give them the independence, to zip this a little bit, as hard as it is, because we want to jump in, but to wait for them to have a go, to wait for them to use all their strategies that we're going to talk about in a bit, and to really try it out for themselves. And you'll notice, I hope, that the adult didn't hold the book. They're giving the book to the child's owning it, and they're doing it. And hopefully through that, they're like, this is my job to have a go at the tricky words. It's my job to do it. And the adults can give that positive reinforcement. But also there was the need for the odd prompt. So I said, chunk it. A better question would have been, what do you think you can do? But I jumped in and said, chunk it. But the really key thing is for letting your child take control and be in charge. Enjoy the book, enjoy the reading experience, and have that time together to talk about it and enjoy it. So if we move on now to the next slide. So another key aspect about reading is that they are reading to understand, that we are really spending time talking about what they've read, and that there's loads. We're going to make these slides available afterwards, but there are loads of questions that we need to be asking. Some of those WH work questions that are there, but we're going to look now at some other questions that might just sometimes be a little bit harder to ask or harder to think of in the moment. So the next slide shows, sorry, there's the next one. And again. This slide shows a series of questions that we can ask, and the idea of this is that the questions get harder to ask and to answer as we move from the top left down to the bottom right. So up at the top left, if we went from what is the mouse doing, the child can straight away see those the answer in the picture. They can start to ask, answer straight away. What is he sitting on? Where is he? We can start to answer those questions straight away using the facts that are there in front of us. But what we want to do as well is to develop what we call inference. So we want the children to be able to start to think about what could be other alternative questions, and start to infer meaning from the text and the picture. So if we look down at the bottom and we asked a how question, and then over to the right, a how might question, we can be asking now, how might the mouse be feeling? And the child would have to then infer from information there. Now here, it's a picture. And they may say, well, I can see he's smiling and he's got a nut, and I know mice like nuts. So they're starting to add their own narrative from that picture. And then when we're doing that with text, as the child moves towards more text-based books, we've got those inference skills really, really building up over time. So we might be saying things like, why might the mouse be sitting on the rock? Why might the mouse be happy? So we're going into that imagination, into that prediction skills, which are all higher order skills. So those other questions, the who, the why, the who, the where, the what, the when, they're really great, really important questions, but those inference questions are really, really vital, especially as children get a little bit older. So learning those right from the start is fantastic. Okay, so we shall move on. And we're going to pass over to Liz now.
Okay, good evening, everybody. So again, following on from what Jacqui was saying, is how to help but not too much. So again, when we were watching the video and lovely Charlie was talking about he was going to try that again because he wanted to read it with more expression. So hopefully these next few slides are going to give you some ideas of the questions that you can ask your child to support them on their reading journey. Okay, so praise is really important. So again, like Jacqui was talking to Charlie, and he was getting lots of praise about when he broke it down, words down and put them back together, and that's motivation and his confidence as he read through the story. And again, so these next few slides are going to talk about the right question at the right time. Okay, so competent readers use all these different things whilst they're reading. Learning to read is really complex. So again, we're going to help you by talking you through each of these circles in turn. And good readers use all the meaning cues, all the visual cues, and all the structure cues. Okay, so hopefully by the end of this presentation, you'll have some knowledge about what each of those ones are. And again, if you've got any questions about that, then please feel free to add in the chat, or a question pops up, I can pause and go through any of it again, because again, this is the technical part, as they say. So when we're looking at reading, we want children and young people to use these cue sources all in equal measure. So whether your child is 5 or whether your child is 10 or whether your child is 15, all of these things are still really important to use in equal measure to make them a competent and fluent reader. So when we talk about structure, we're talking about the reader understanding the order of the words and that sounding right as they read them aloud. When we're talking about meaning within a text, we're talking about pictures, and often that can get confused with a visual cue source. Well, actually that does fall under what we call meaning, and I'll go on to explain a little bit more about that in depth as we go on with the next slides. So again, prior knowledge, are they drawing on what they know about the story? So again, have they read a story, if we go back to the picture of the mouse, have they read a story about a woodland? Have they been to a woodland? Are they drawing on their own experiences? Can they remember what it smelled like? Can they remember what they felt like while they were there? What was the weather like? Can they remember and make those connections between what they have already read? And the visual is the letters on the page, looking at those and reading the words. So again, if you get a word like was and saw, are they looking through at those letters in the right order? So that's all the visual information, the sounds and the words. So please feel free, if you've got any questions, we're more than happy to answer them as we go through these next slides. So again, when we're talking about the right question at the right time, so if you notice that there was a sentence that didn't quite sound right, then your question to your child would be, does that sound right? And I'm going to go through some examples of that in a moment. So don't worry if it's all a bit overwhelming at the moment. And again, the meaning, which is to do with the pictures and the prior knowledge, does that make sense? And again, visual information, does it look right? So, and again, there are other prompts that you can use, again, like try that again is always a good one. So whichever cue source, if you think, you know, I'm not too sure about which one it is or which question, then or you can always say, try that again. Okay, so let's talk about the visual prompts. So we're talking about letter knowledge, recognizing the differences between words. So I use the example of was and saw, and quite often children do reverse those, and or they can reverse words with the beginning with like B and D or T and L, or I'm sure you've got your own examples of ones that your child has reversed. But again, using that cue source of does that look right, or again, try that again. Have they used their phonics to help them? So if there was a constant, what we call a consonant cluster at the beginning, can you hear the st or the br in the word? If the word was brush, can they break those first letters down? Can they recognize the first letter? Again, so using that knowledge that you know that they have. The high frequency words, can they see those and read them straight away, such as and the and on? Or again, can they see any like analogy with the words? So as can they see the all in call or calling? Or again, like we saw as an example in the video, can they chunk the words and break it down into those smaller parts and put it back together? And the prompt for that is, does that look right? And this element is all about the letters on the page. So when we talk about visual, those are the different elements that we're looking at. Okay, the structure of how it works. So again, can they use their predicting skills? Have they, in their story voice, have they heard the little old man and the little old? So what would make sense in that sentence? Would that sound right? So again, that prompt of, does it sound right? And again, can they work it out for themselves? Can they read and understand it if they miss out a word? And does that tense agreement make sense? So again, went to house, can they hear that needs a the? And again, the boy catched the ball. Can they see that doesn't sound right? And again, that prompt would be, does that sound right? And that you would, in some, if you wanted to, one thing you could do is model it back to them. Okay, and again, looking at the meaning. So looking at the pictures on the page, calling back from that prior knowledge. So if we go back to the mouse in the woodland, do they like mice? Did they like their visit to when they went to the woods? Would they like to go again? What do you think they would see this time? Would they see different things in different seasons and times of the year? And again, just having that, making them, help them to make connections with what they're reading. And the prompt for that would be, is that makes sense? So again, reading with your child, where do they like to read in your house? Do they like reading in their bedrooms? Do they like reading in the front room? Where do they like and associate reading as comfort and something that they enjoy? Okay, so we're just going to have a look now at an example and of how you can scaffold those questions if this was a sentence. So again, if this was something that you were sharing with your child and reading a book, and the sentence was, the dog ran up the hill. I just want to pause there now and have you to have a look at the 3 different options of what your child could say, and again, a prompt that you could give them to help them fix it and put it right. Okay, so if we have a look at example number 1, and it said the puppy ran up the hill. So again, what they've done there is they've made sense of the picture. So that was really good. And that, does it sound right? And does it make sense? So the puppy ran up the hill does make sense, and it does sound right. The duck ran up the hill. Well, we can see in the picture that they would need to try that again. But again, if we look, they have used the initial letter. It does both begin with D. So again, you would prompt that and went, does that sound right? Does it look right? Does it make sense? The dog runned up the hill. So the dog runned up the hill. And again, when we're hearing sentences all the time, and especially as teachers and being in school, we often hear runned up, and again kind of goed, kind of wented. So it's again about modelling that back to the dog ran up the hill. What sounds better? Giving them an alternative and modelling it back to them. Okay, so here is, I'm just going to give you a moment to read through some of the praises and prompting and how you could overcome those examples. So again, as we can see, we've got what you would say on the left and how you would prompt that again. Okay, so reluctant readers. I have lots of conversations in school about different texts and different books that you can help remotivate and reignite reading with your child. So all reading is good reading, whether that be from a magazine or whether it be from a reading book. And again, for some people, reading books are not their thing. So go with them. If they want to read about farming, or if they want to read about cars, or if they want to read about how sweets are made, which is one of the texts that I'm reading at the moment, because curly whirlies are this child's thing. So whatever their thing is that they want to read about, then there's a great breadth of different places that you can find texts to excite them. And again, so just making reading part of every day. Just a few minutes a day can make a really big difference. So if you can use a now and next board, give them the opportunity to say how many minutes that they're going to read for, and try and make it the same time each day so they know when it's coming and how long it's going to last for. And again, going back to that reading with the right time in the right place. If straight after school they want a little bit of a break and a snack, and then try again half an hour after that, then have an agreement of time, or is it before bed? So again, just think about, I know this is ideal because everybody leads busy lives with lots of packed activities. So again, just finding those few minutes each day. And again, these are just some ideas now for you to try. So again, you could try a reading challenge in your house where you start reading for 2 minutes on one day and then you build it up. And again, about you choosing a book or you reading it together, sharing a page, you reading one page, then reading another, just some different ideas of trying to make it a reading fun. And again, this is just an example of a school promoting reading, and this child has got to their million words, so that's amazing. Okay, and again, just some different ideas of games that you can play with words. So again, what you need is 2 people, and you need 12 cards, and you need to write the same words on 2 cards even. So you put the cards face down. Honestly, I don't know what happened there, sorry. So you then would turn all the words face down and play it and find the matching pairs. So this is a fun memory game. Another way is playing the fish element of it, where you have 3 cards each, and then player 1 asks player 2 if they have that word, and if player 2 has it, they give it to player 1, or if not, then they fish until the winner is the one to get rid of all of their cards. or you can play my pile, your pile. So again, using those 12 cards. So again, you shuffle the cards, and if the child can say it, then they keep the card, and if not, it goes to the bottom of the pile. So just a few ideas there to make reading fun in your home. I'm going to pass to Emma now, who is going to talk to you about spelling.
Good evening. So we'll move on from reading. We'll have a quick look at spelling and writing. So you might find that your child gets sent home a worksheet, something a bit like that, and it might be a bit overwhelming. They've got lots of, got 10 words there to try and spell, which maybe is too much for your child. So it's trying to think of different activities to make it a bit more fun and a bit more interactive for your child. So you could even just fold the paper in half and just focus on 5 words, maybe initially. You could get a colour pen, a highlighter pen or a coloured pencil, and just get them to colour in the ES at the end of every word. Because you might find that they haven't even realised that those spellings have got something in common. So it just makes it a little bit easier for them. But we'll go through a few activities that you can do to really help them focus on the spellings. And also, if your child really struggles with the words that are coming home from school, I would always have a word with the teacher and say that you think they're a bit too hard, maybe. It's always worth mentioning. I'll go on to can we go on to the next one, please, Liz? And also, if you think 10 words, 10 words may be too much for your child to focus on in one go. So even just do 3 words a night, or 4, 4 or 5 words, whatever helps your child. And it's probably better to do 5 minutes a night on spellings throughout the week than to do it as a half-hour block. So if you had time, you could get them to do it on this grid every day, for instance. So you get them to look at the word first, then they say it out loud, which is a really important part of spelling, then cover it up and see if they can write it from memory, and then go back and check it. And even activities like writing it with their eyes closed, on a piece of paper, that can really help their memory. If we go on to the next one, Liz. So have you missed out one there, Liz? Sorry, I feel like there might be another slide. Okay. So something important for spelling is to try and make it multisensory. And if it's multisensory, it means that you're trying to use all 3 senses at once. And this really helps get it into your memory better. So I think we've missed out one of the slides, but the three ways of making it multisensory is if your child can see the word, if they can say the word and spell it out loud, and if they can use some kind of movement to try and get the spelling into the memory. So it could be something like writing it in sand, or writing it in salt on a work surface, or shaving foam, or bubbles in the sink using washing up liquid. And if they can actually write the word and spell it out and feel the spelling, it will really help them remember it. And there is just some examples here of different ways that they could do their spelling homework in a bit more of a fun way. So your child could pick an activity each week and do that to practice their spellings. So they're still doing the words that are sent home, but they're doing it in a different way. So it might be worth trying to incorporate it. Or they could write the words in the air, or they could write them on a computer, or they could even write the word in the air. Just hold up the hand, spell it in front of them. Even record the spelling letter by letter on their iPad or their phone if they've got one. And for older children, we say it's better to try and use letter names rather than the sounds. So for instance, try and get them to say A rather than A. But I think for Key Stage 1 children, it's probably best just to stick with the sounds, just as a tip. Could we go on to the next one, please, Liz? There's just another example there of different activities that you can use, that your child could pick the one that appeals to them the most. We'll go on to the next one, Liz. So just try and, you can be creative with it, whatever is going to motivate your child. you can almost trick them into not realizing the spelling, but that they're actually playing a game. So I just use lots of these games in school, but I just adapt it into a spelling game or a reading game. So if you want them to practice the reading, you could just do it on the flashcards. And if you want them to practice the spellings, so for instance, for Snakes and Ladders, every time they roll the dice, they have to spell a word, which could be off their spelling list. And for Jenga, every time they pull out a brick, they have to spell a word. You could adapt any game to make it fun, make it into a spelling game or a reading game. And then your child will be enjoying it more, rather than it being a battle trying to get them to practice the spellings. Can we have the next slide, please? And for writing homework, I've had lots of parents tell me that their children are really reluctant to write at home. They very much want to leave the writing in the classroom. So some children, they might be happy to read at home, but not to write. So again, try and make it fun. Just even having coloured pens or coloured paper, it can just motivate your child that bit more. And they have to be able to say what they want to write before they actually write it down. And if they can't say it, they aren't going to be able to write it. So always get your child to say out loud what they're going to write before they actually put the pen to paper. And have a practice page. You could have a practice page and a perfect page. So on the practice page, they could be having a go at the spellings that they want to write down in the sentences. And then the perfect page is where they actually write down what they've practiced. And also, I think if they have writing homework, it's best always to go for quality rather than quantity. So it might just be worth reminding your child it's better to write a short amount that's really good than pages and pages where they've not checked it or there's lots of mistakes. If we have the next slide, please. So there's just a little diagram there to illustrate. So you start off with say it. So they say it out loud, then they write it down, then they read the sentence, then they think about the next sentence, and the cycle starts again. They say it out loud, they write it. So if you can get your child into that habit, it will really improve the quality of the writing that they do. Can we have the next one, please? And things like online, you can get things like story cubes where they can make the cube and they can throw the cube, and it might just give them an idea for a story. Or you can, I mean, I've got some story dice that I've bought and the children love them. It just really helps them start the writing. If we go on to the next one. So there's an idea there. Again, it's things like this are online. So they roll the dice and whatever number they get, that can be the character. Then they can roll again for the setting and they can roll again for the problem. It just might help them start the writing. That can be the real barrier sometimes, actually starting it. Next one, please, Liz. Some useful resources. I mean, I highlighter pens, coloured pens, paper, stick-it notes are really good if they want to maybe get their ideas down on different stick-it notes for a story or a set of instructions. Plastic letters or magnetic letters, maybe a whiteboard. I know some children love having lots of stationery, so it can just motivate them. And the next one, please, Liz. There's just some children as well, if they've got a real barrier to writing, every now and again, it might be worth letting them use, if you've got access to a computer or an iPad or a tablet. I know some schools now, they let the children take Chromebooks home. And you can actually, there's some instructions here. I won't go through the instructions, but it's quite easy to set it up on the computer where your child can actually dictate their writing and the Word program will actually write it for them. So, you know, there's no harm in letting that happen every now and again as an alternative. And then the children will have to read through it to check through if it's correct. But it's just a useful function when you've got children who really, really don't want to write. The technology is there. But have a read of that maybe in your own time, because it depends what device you've got. Can I have the next slide, please? And then on the Learning Support website, which the address is there. If you click on families, which is it's at the top on the green boxes, you can click on families, and then there are some parent video guides. There's maths, alphabet skills, reading at home, how to do a book walkthrough, and there's 9 steps for success at writing. And there's also something there on dyslexia and maths. So if you wanted any more information, it might be worth clicking on those video links just to flag up that resource for you. Next slide, please. So thank you for listening. There are some more slides after this, which you'll see when you get sent them, but they're just further resources. We're not going to go through them all tonight. But were there any questions, Paul?
I can't see any in the chat. Is
No, there
anybody
aren't any in the chat, I'm afraid. So do drop some in. While we're getting going with questions, maybe I can start. Does it matter if a child doesn't finish a book?
I'll start the response and then pass over. Absolutely not. It doesn't matter at all. I think for many of our children, what we've got to show them is that this isn't going to go on and on and on, that the homework session, and we've got to keep it sharp and short and enjoyable. So it might be that you use things like timers to say we're going to read until the timer runs out, or we're going to we're going to read to this page and we're going to read this little bit. I think we've got to always be careful and wary of being greedy at homework time. Keep it really tight. If you've said 10 minutes, keep it to 10 minutes. And then, you're more likely next day that they'll come back knowing that you kept your word and you didn't actually keep them for an hour or half an hour. So going back to those slides about finding a time that works for everybody, but then sort of sticking to that time and saying, okay, you've done really well and you're going to have to stop. And that would be great if we're stopping them while they're enjoying it, and we'll say, let's finish it, let's finish it, or see what happens tomorrow. So I think it's just really important, Paul, a good question to not be focusing on finishing it, but be focusing on the skills that they've shown, and most importantly on the enjoyment. Are they enjoying it, and are they taking control? I don't know if anyone wants to add anything else to that.
I think as they get older as well, the books are so long that you can't physically finish it anyway. So just do a chapter or however much.
I think as well, I would just, sorry.
I was just going to say, and also with the much longer text, there's no harm, mum or dad, reading a little bit to the child themselves to model good reading to them, so everybody can get involved.
Absolutely. I was just going to say very similar. So there was a picture about reading to your child, and that is still really so important, whatever age they are, to keep reading to them. And that might be, as Amanda just said, part of the book, that you say, actually, I'll read this bit, shall I? And or from Liz's example, I'll read one page, you read one page. But it's a great opportunity for you to read that book, because then they hear how you attend to the punctuation and how you use a story voice, and how you can model how, this is a tricky word, and sort of model the kind of things that you're doing to work it out. So all of those things are really important.
Or again, just to add to that, maybe if they were finding it tough but would like to finish the story, there may be a place for them to hear it as an audio book, in that scenario, if that technology would support them reading it, if it was a text that they had to read.
I absolutely back that up. We used to take long car journeys, and one of the things that our primary kids were just absolutely fixated on was the audiobook of Lord of the Rings. You know, they couldn't possibly have read that at their ages, but they would just well, we were all entranced by the story, to be quite honest, and it really helped pass the time in the car as well. So you know, that was a really good thing, I think, for everybody.
I think that's key, Paul, because sometimes for our children who are struggling with reading, they need access to the language and the genre, style, and the vocabulary that is appropriate for their age, not their stage. So it's really important that we give them that access to really quite challenging texts, even if they can't access them as a reader, so they can hear all that language and use that for their own writing, and for obviously for their own knowledge and enjoyment and engagement. So yeah, you know, similar to, as Liz said, similar to sort of getting magazines or whatever is of interest, it's also important to keep getting those texts that are really aimed at their age, so that they can engage with the plots and the deeper and more complicated vocabulary.
Still looking for questions. Can't see any at the moment. I mean, let me just throw another one in while we're waiting. I know that many schools have, you know, good reading schemes, and of course, kids have the habit, don't they, in the playground of going, which book are you on? I'm on. And sometimes kids can get a bit demotivated when they find that their friends might be on a, you know, have read more than them, or are steaming ahead, and they're still on whatever a book. What would your advice be to parents in those kinds of situations?
I think there's lots of different texts out there. So I mean, all Stockport libraries have access to Borrow Box, which is an app supported by Stockport Libraries, which anybody can download, which has a huge range of fiction, non-fiction, and there are elements of magazines on there, and it's all for free. So I think in terms of trying to give them different opportunities of things that they would like to read, that to reignite that enthusiasm and enjoyment comes first. And I would always talk to class teachers and people in the schools, and you know, have that conversation and see if they can direct them to different authors, or whether they've got different sets of books which may reignite their love of reading once again.
And I guess, Liz, that's also a way of kind of your child saying, well, you know, I've read something that you haven't read, because there's an immense breadth of reading out there, and so gives a child who might be struggling otherwise with the traditional reading scheme, you know, a bit of kudos in the playground, a bit of kind of well, I've read something you haven't.
I think as well, you know, linking back to what Liz said, it's really important to talk to your child's class teacher. We know that if a child is struggling with reading, it can greatly affect their self-esteem, and if there are comments from others, that's going to add to that. So it's really important to talk openly with the class teacher and say that you've noticed this, and wondering what you can do together to address it, because you know that level of self-esteem and self-belief is really vital in terms of us continuing to develop their confidence and belief in themselves as a reader. So we've got to all work on that and address any negativity that is around that, and perhaps sort of some chat with the child about you know their skills and qualities, and making sure they see themselves as a rounded confident person in so many ways, and that reading doesn't become the be all and end all of their identity. So I think having a chat and making sure there's lots of opportunities to build their confidence and self-belief.
Yeah, I think it's just, trying to focus on your child's strengths and let your child know and be aware of that. So yeah, they might not be so good at reading, but they're good at all these other activities. You know, it could be sport, it could be drama, it could be art. Just let always reinforce with your child what they're good at as well. And it's, as adults, you know, stressing to them that we can't be good at everything. We've all got different strengths and different things that we find hard. Again, it's back to self-esteem, isn't it?
Some book publishers now have also become quite clever in some of the books that are available, and they're also accessible by parents if you go online. One of those being the Barrington Stoke range, because they now produce books that have a low reading age but high interest level, so that the children feel like they're reading much more appropriate material, which of course helps with that self-esteem. And it also helps schools to move away from classing the books, because children are very, very clever at working out the levels which all books seem to be placed on. But the Barrington Stoke books do seem to be have managed to devise that knack of not making it quite so visible, really. So certainly for parents, I would go onto the Barrington Stoke website, because you can also order books from there online yourselves to be delivered at home.
It's really useful to know, Amanda. Thank you. Well, we don't seem to have any questions in either the chat or the Q&A. I could only take that as suggesting that actually you've produced a really informative hour. I've certainly learned a lot about how to encourage younger children to read and spell and begin to write as well. That's fantastic. So I'm going to suggest perhaps we end there. But before we close, I just want to say thank you to Amanda and her team for giving up time today to give us their knowledge, their expertise, their advice, and just a reminder that both the slides and the webinar itself will be available on the PACTS YouTube website or the PACTS ordinary website. You can get a link to that in due course. So thanks for coming along, and we'll end there. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.